Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie, and I believe that the right book at the right time can change lives, and that all readers should read children's literature, especially adults. So that's what we do here on the KidLit Love podcast. We celebrate all things children's literature: picture books, early readers, middle grade, and young adult novels for readers of all ages. In each episode, we'll talk with children's literature authors and discuss their books, their hopes, their dreams for readers, their writing process, and much, much more. Whether you're an adult reading to their inner child or connecting the young readers in your life with fantastic books, you've come to the right place. So grab a notebook to build your TBR, and let's get to today's episode of KidLit Love. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the KidLit Love podcast. I'm Stephanie Affinito, your KidLit loving host, inviting you back to another bookish conversation with a children's literature author. Today, I'm talking with Megan McDonald. Megan is the critically acclaimed author of over 60 books for children and young readers, including series that you likely know and love like Judy Moody and the Stink books. She's here today to talk about not one, but two new releases. DOOR Diaries, ALIZA and the Hobgoblins, the second book in an enchanting series that will be happily devoured by all of those who believe in fairies and other magical folk, like me. Plus, we'll talk about Bunny and Clyde on the Lam, the newest book in the Bunny and Clyde series that follows two adorable characters who couldn't be outlaws when they tried, but are now being framed as the Fall Guys. I can't wait to talk about both of them with her, so let's get right to the episode. Megan, welcome to KidLit Love. I am so glad you're here today.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Oh, not more excited than me. This is a bookish dream come true. I have loved your books. I've shared them with countless students, most notably my own daughter, where we have, just bonded over many of your books. So I am so excited to say
Oh,
hello
thank
today.
you. I feel all warm and fuzzy already.
Good, good. I am glad. Now, I know listeners will likely know who you are and have, a number of books that have passed by their hands over the years, but I would still love to press rewind a bit, like go back 60-ish books.
Oh, wow.
I would just love a little sneak peek into your backstory and your journey to where you've gotten with so many beautiful books today.
Well, before I became a writer, I was a children's librarian. So I worked in public libraries and I told stories and put on story times for kids.
Yeah.
And somebody gave me these beautiful uh, puppets of a hermit crab and a fish, and I wanted to use them at story time, but I couldn't find any story about a hermit crab. So I just wrote one and made it up, and it had all of these sounds where the hermit crab would scritch scratch across the sand looking for a new home. And after I told the story with the puppets, all the parents came up to me and they said, "You always put the book out for us to check out. Where's the book?" And I'm like, there is no book. I made this up. So that planted the seed that I had already sort of worked out the rhythm and the response from kids, and it planted the seed that maybe I could write that down. And that became my very first book 30 some years ago, called Is This a House for Hermit Crab, which actually was newly illustrated a couple years ago. So there's a brand new edition of it after all these years. But
Wow.
that was the beginning, with just that little hermit crab looking for a new home.
Wow. So the books found you, right? You wrote the
Yes.
story and they found you. Wow, I did not know that. I always love knowing that moment, like that moment when
Yeah,
someone decides.
and really people don't know my picture books as much, but I wrote picture books for about 10 years before I came up with Judy Moody.
Wow. Now, how did you come up with Judy Moody? I can't have you here without asking that. My daughter would be very upset with me.
Well, Judy Moody kind of came out of growing up with so many sisters. I have four older sisters, and all of the antics and the funny things and the stories that happened growing up with all these siblings. So I wanted to write those down, and I started just writing little vignettes of all the funny things like the Toad Pea Club or the fake hand in the toilet. And I had I had about 25 of these stories, and I didn't know what to make of them really. And I was at a conference speaking where I met an editor, and I ended up showing them to her, and she had the idea you could, if you can think of an overall theme, you could put all these episodes into a chapter book. So uh, when I first came up with the first draft of Judy Moody, it was like 350 pages long or something because I had so many stories. So from that, I cut a lot of the material out. And then, of course, after the first book, my editor said, well, you have all these other stories. Maybe we should do another book. So it kind of was never even thought of or meant to be a series, but that sort of happened organically as we went along, and I kept having more ideas.
Yeah, like literally the rest is history, right?
Yeah,
Idea after
right,
idea after
right.
idea. Wow. Well, thank you for taking that detour with me.
Of course, of course.
I've got to ask that. Well, I have you on here, even though it's not the book or the series that we are talking about today. We're lucky because you're talking about two of your new releases coming out pretty close to each other in February. So let's talk about Bunny and Clyde. First. Bunny and Clyde on the Lam. Tell us a bit about, you could tell us about the series, of course, but I'd love for you to give listeners a sneak peek into the story and the inspiration behind it.
Okay, well, Bunny and Clyde, it actually did start with their names. When I was growing up in the 70s, there was a famous song about the outlaws Bonnie and Clyde,
Mhm.
and we all knew the song and sang it all the time and were kind of fascinated with these outlaws. And so one day, I don't know why it popped in my head, but one day I was thinking about that and I thought of the names Bunny and Clyde, and I had that idea for a long time before I knew who they were or what they were up to or anything. But then I thought, the real Bonnie and Clyde are bank robbers, right? So I thought, well, maybe I could do a twist and it would have a little nod to the names, but the twist would be that Bunny and Clyde are they're one is a rabbit, one is a chipmunk, and they're two characters who have always been good. They do everything right, and they start to wonder, what is it like to be bad? So then they think like, let's try this on, let's be bad, but they don't have the first clue how to do something bad. So where would you go to look up how to be bad? They go to the library and they say, do you have any bad books here? And the librarian is like, well, we like to think we have good books in the library. So they do some reading, and uh, they get some ideas about how to be bad. And so then they try it on a little bit. But as the story goes on, everything they try to do, like TP their neighbor's rose bushes, turns into something good because it actually protected the roses from the first frost. So no matter what they try, they end up being good. And I had so much fun playing with that concept. And when I first read Bunny and Clyde to a classroom of third graders, I was so taken aback because they laughed louder than in any Judy Moody book that I have read aloud in the last 25 years. And they kept screaming, they're good. No, they're bad. No, they're good. So I just felt so elated that that concept really came across of kids. They want to champion them so much to do good things. And
Yes.
so that kind of hit the right note and hit the heart of it. Um, so then uh, I had had a dream for a million years of working with the illustrator Scott Nash. He's just so brilliant. And um, so when I submitted the first draft, my editor knew for a long time, and all these books I would do, I'd be like, how about Scott Nash? But anyway, so when I submitted Bunny and Clyde, she called me up and she said, "This is for Scott Nash." And I was so pleased that
Finally.
all these years I would get to do a book with him. And he just really brought those characters to life. And he has
Yeah.
a few nods to Bonnie and Clyde, like Bunny always wears her beret like the
Yes.
real Bunny did. And he said somewhere along the way, he was the one who said, "Oh, I can just picture the wanted poster." Well, there was no wanted poster, but I went back and I wove that into the story because I'm like, we have to have the wanted poster of the two bad bunnies, even though Clyde's a chipmunk. So
Yeah.
that was the beginning of Bunny and Clyde. And then I had another idea because when I read a little bit about the real Bonnie and Clyde, a lot of their life was hiding out, because they were bank robbers, they were always hiding out.
Yeah.
And so I had read that they hid out for weeks in this old abandoned amusement park. And I love that idea of, I remember going to my childhood amusement park after it had like the old wooden roller coaster and the teacup rides, but after the park had closed down because they made them, much bigger and fancier. And I remember just walking around there and it's like time stops on one particular day they walked out of that park and you would still see like somebody's flip-flop laying there or so I had that image in my mind and I thought, oh, I've got to write another Bunny and Clyde because they just have to hide out in an abandoned amusement park. So in the second volume, they because they tried to be bad in the first one,
Yeah.
friend's tooth he has a loose tooth that he puts under his pillow for the tooth fairy and it goes missing. And so he thinks, well, I guess it's the coin that's left by the tooth fairy that goes missing. And so they immediately turn to Bunny and Clyde and think that they are the culprits. So Bunny and Clyde have to go on the lam, which is on the run, right? And they have to get on their tandem bike and have a bike chase and all sorts of things. And then, of course, they end up hiding out at an abandoned amusement park. And I,
And
I
the teacup.
yeah, and the teacup ride. I think Scott Nash was probably uh, more than scratching his head because he's like, "Megan, how do I draw a hall of mirrors where it looks like there's 1,000 bunnies, or Clyde looks like, there are 10 of him?" But he just, those are some of my favorite illustrations in the book.
Yeah.
He,
Yeah. And I'm so glad you brought them up because it is this beautifully illustrated chapter book where you just dive in and you are having fun and you are laughing and you are there. And those illustrations, even though they are illustrations, they bring action and movement and adventure to the book in a way, that would be there without them, but just brings something special to a kid's book like this.
Absolutely. Like we had a huge discussion about, because on the lam is an old expression. And so some people thought kids aren't going to know what that means.
Right.
But I really wanted to keep it. And Scott immediately said, the cover alone will show them what it means because Bunny and Clyde will be trying to escape on their bicycle and they'll have all the friends behind them trying to catch up. So
Yes. Now, there is one thing I want to bring up about Bunny that I love very much, and we actually kind of joked about it before we pressed record, is that Bunny has a notebook and Bunny keeps track of things, and that just made me so happy because as someone absolutely obsessed with notebooks, who has always had one on her since she can remember, I just felt an instant kinship to Bunny.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm a collector of notebooks as well. I always have a notebook, even if it's a pocket-sized one with me.
Yes.
I'm still kind of old school where my ideas and my notes, I still have to write them down with pen or pencil.
Yeah.
And so I always have the note. I started out on the first Judy Moody. I used to get those 99-cent composition books, with the
Yes.
marbly
Yep.
cover. And so every Judy Moody book has its own composition book that has all the thoughts and notes for that
Wow.
book. Well, now they have decomposition books that are
Yeah.
actually recycled paper, and so I can feel good about that. So I always have a decomposition book with me.
Yes.
And it's kind of fun to go back and look at what some of those thoughts were from those early Judy Moody books in the notebooks.
Oh, I can't even imagine that. That must be quite the collection. Like just to, like you said, to go back in time and see where it started for each book. That's
Exactly.
wonderful.
Also, I was so surprised to learn that the real Bonnie, Elizabeth Parker, she, when they were hiding out, she was always writing poetry. So she always had a notebook with her and was writing
Oh,
poetry. And Clyde played the saxophone. I don't know why you would do that when you're hiding
when you're
out.
on the lam.
But right, when you're in the lamp. I didn't put that in the book, but the notebook made it into the book.
Yeah. Oh, I loved that. I loved that. So we've got Bunny and Clyde on the Lam. It is, an illustrated chapter book. It is delightful. It is so much fun. You get lost, you can escape. And then we have Fairy Door Diaries, right? Where you're getting
Completely
lost and
different,
you're
right?
having fun and you're having escape. And now we've got these beautifully color illustrations that just liven it up as well. So let's shift gears. And I'd love for you to tell listeners about Eliza and the Hobgoblins.
Okay. Well, the Fairy Door Diaries, oh gosh, it's probably been, I would say maybe 10 years ago that I first started into
Wow.
these. And at the very beginning, believe it or not, this came out of the Stink books. Stink has a best friend named Sophie of the Elves. And I love that character, but because she's a sidekick, I never get to really fully explore. So I started out thinking about Sophie of the Elves. Excuse me. And then as I sort of went along, I thought, to really do the magic and bring the magic to kids, I need to depart from Stink and Judy's world and just have a completely new character. So I came up with Eliza of the Elves. And when I was researching all of this folklore about fairies and all different kinds of, my idea was that I could have a different type of fairy featured in each book. So I was researching all these fairies and I found out that there's so much fairy folklore in the UK and Cornwall and Wales and Ireland and Scotland, and they still have festivals every year that they sell where they celebrate fairies and they know all the stories and all of this. So anyway, I found out one of the centers of the fairy festivals and lore was Truro in Cornwall. And I had vacationed on Cape Cod in a little town called Truro. And I thought there must be a connection. Well, it turns out the Cape Cod town is named after the one in Cornwall. And so I set the books in Truro. And where we vacationed, it was a set of about five little artists' cottages that you could rent. And so Eliza and her mother and her little sister B live in the main cottage and they rent out these other cottages. And there's an old artist that lives in one of the cottages named Mr. McQuestion. And he's kind of mysterious because he seems to know magic. So Eliza is very enamored of him and they hint around and talk about magic. And anyway, so I had the setting and the character, but it also came from when I was visiting family in Minnesota. I was taking a walk around Lake Harriet in Minneapolis, and I found one of those fairy doors at the base of a tree. And I just became so enchanted with this idea of a fairy door. And at the tree, if you ever go to Lake Harriet and you find the fairy tree, you can leave the fairies a note and the fairies answer you back. So how
Oh.
cool is that? So then I became fascinated with these fairy doors, and I thought, there have been lots of books about fairies, but it would be so much fun to feature the door as a portal to these other worlds. And each time Eliza goes through the fairy door, she has a little space under the where the stairs are behind her bedroom, and she calls it the land of UnderStair, and it's a magical little space for her. So when she's there, she goes through the little fairy door that's at the baseboard, and each time something has to happen magically for her to get through the door, and she never knows when that'll be. But when she goes through the fairy door, she enters a different magical world each time.
Mhm. And it's that first page. Oh, that first page gets me. Imagine a door, a teeny tiny fairy door. Now imagine it is magic. Open the door. And then you turn the page and literally the magical fun begins.
Exactly. And I also love where she comes home from school and she takes off her school uniform. And when she puts her play clothes on, that's always when the magic starts.
hmm hmm Now in this book, we've got some magic, we've got some mess in this one. So tell listeners a bit about this book specifically.
So in Eliza and the Hobgoblins, it's a little bit of a twist because in the first adventure, she goes into the land of the flower fairies, and she has to solve a problem or a riddle or whatever to help the fairies. But the whole book then basically takes place in this magical land of the fairies. But in the second book, um, hobgoblins they're kind of like think of them like tiny little elves or brownies, and they can be very mischievous.
Mhm.
And they they're known to like to clean and tidy up, but sometimes that can create more mess. So anyway, I thought, well, it would be fun to actually have them enter Eliza's world this time.
Yeah.
So she goes into their land, but at some point they follow her through the door, and there's tons of them everywhere, and they keep telling her they're going to tidy up. They also only speak in rhyme, so it sounds really cute, but sometimes it's kind of chaotic and she's not sure what's going on. And they start to wreak havoc and make quite a mess, even though they've promised her that they would tidy up her room, which her mother has asked her to do that day. Um, so they're all over the place and making messes, and she's trying to figure out how what do I do about this? And all of a sudden they hear footsteps on the stairs, and her mother's coming. And if a parent sees the hobgoblins, they disappear, and she doesn't want this to happen. So she has to get them to all hide. And there's a close scrape with the mother coming into the room. And then some of the folklore around hobgoblins, I like to always weave in the actual mythology. So
Yeah.
some of the folklore is that they love shiny things. They like to kind of dress up and decorate themselves with ribbons and finery. And so I wove into the story. Oh, and also you can see a hobgoblin if you eat burnt toast. So that's what Eliza had for breakfast, which allowed her to see them. And but they like cakes and cookies and things like that. So she figures out, because she's always reading about fairies in her giant book of fairies. And so she figures out that she can bring them some cakes and cookies to appease them. And they find in her drawer all kinds of ribbons and scarves and things that they can adorn themselves with. But they are also after a shiny thimble because they think it's gold and they like these shiny things. So
Yeah.
she also has to navigate that. So a lot happens in this one, but I love the twist of where the fairies this time, or the fairy folk, enter her world, and she has to figure that out.
Yeah. Which honestly is every kid with a messy room's dream.
Yeah, yes. You wouldn't want the fairies to come and clean your room, right?
Yes, it's a book where everyone's going to be going to eat burnt toast and, find the golden thimble
Right,
and do
right.
all the things. Now, the illustrations in this book, as I mentioned, are in color and they are delightful. They
Aren't they
are
beautiful?
whimsical and magical and fun. And so I do want to give a little bit of recognition to the illustrator of this book, Lenny Wen. Oh my gosh, the illustrations are just delightful.
She she is just she's so wonderful. I mean, they're so colorful, but they're so playful. And
Yeah.
she had to draw the room with a complete
The messy room is the
mess of
best.
all Eliza's collections everywhere like mine. So, um, we gave her a lot of challenges, but she makes the she makes the hobgoblins so endearing. You just
Yeah.
want to invite them in and be your friends. And so Hobby, Nobby, and Tobby she does portraits of them, and they're just so funny with their, they have the pointy ears and the green faces, but just wonderful expressions.
Yeah. Yeah.
And um
Which,
and
as you said, they're magical and endearing. There's wonderful pictures of them throughout, but I think one of my favorite pages is when they are piled on top of each other, and you just have all these hobgoblins in a in a bunch.
in a heap, right? I love that
Yeah.
one too. Well, when I first I was at a conference with all indie booksellers, excuse me, when I first debuted the first Fairy Door Diary, and almost every single person just was so drawn to the book immediately because they recognized the illustrations are still painted by hand. They're
Mhm.
not done digitally, and there's something,
Yeah.
it, I mean, digitally it's such a great tool and you get wonderful art, but there's just something so warm about still thinking about painting with a brush or filling in with colored pencils. And that was something that everybody immediately responded to in the books.
Yeah. Yeah. The pictures just definitely pull you in. Now, as you think about both of these books going out into the world right now, what is your hope for them, right? For your hope for readers who get a chance to read these stories?
Well, I think, you know, it's kind of a tough world right now out there, and
Yeah.
kids have to take so much on as kids compared to when it was like my childhood. And so some of what I hope what kids take away is just the pure delight of reading and how it transports you and takes you literally to another land, a land of imagination. And if it's Bunny and Clyde, hopefully it makes you laugh along the way. And they do some things wrong and make mistakes, and you connect with that because we know that in our own lives. And with the fair, I mean, Bunny and Clyde, even though they're animals, are more rooted in reality, in a real world. But with the Fairy Door Diaries, they are just complete fantasies. So in those books, I really hope that it just provides a magical place for kids to go in their imagination and
Yeah.
transform their own rooms or little spaces under the stairs into a magical place. I think it's so important now more than ever when we have so many screens to, I don't think kids spend a lot of time alone anymore. And I just feel like to have any time where you just get to live with your imagination is really important. So that's part of my hope for the
Yeah.
books.
Well, I would say that that is certainly going to happen for the young readers that you're writing to, but all of us adults need this beautiful magical escape just as much in these
Yeah.
very hard times. So, whoever is reading these books with those children, or even if they're not, even if they just need a nice, delightful escape well as well. Both of them are going to get it. It is just a beautiful step into another world that, we just need sometimes. And your books just do that so wonderfully.
Thank you. Thank you. That's my hope.
Yeah. Now, where's the best place for listeners to find you so they can keep up with all of your books and everything coming out?
Well, I do have a website at meganmcdonald.net where they can find out. It's not updated, so I need to add a lot of the new books, but um, really the best places are probably judymoody.com and stinkmoody.com because even though they're about Judy and Stink, they also have things about me and it tells you where, if you want to write me a letter or send me a drawing, where to do that. And I do have a Facebook page that I post on sometimes when I have a new book coming. Candlewick Press also has,
Mhm.
they have a good presence on Instagram and Facebook and social media. So they often will also be telling you when there's a new book out.
Yeah. Okay. I will put links to all of those, the multiple websites, Candlewick for sure. I will put those in the show notes and of
Okay.
course links to both of these books to make it easy for listeners to get their hands on them. Thank you so much for coming today. It was a wonderful conversation. I feel like I got lots of little Easter eggs now I could share with my daughter. Like, did you know? If she's 18, it doesn't matter. Like the love of the books you read in childhood just never goes away, at least in my mind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. We really carry that through. And it's actually been fun to have so many years since I started Judy Moody because now I have kids who are in college that come to my book
Yes.
signings because Judy Moody was beloved to them when they were 8 years old. So
Yes.
that's a
Exactly. Yeah.
really fun thing that happens.
Wow. Well, it's well deserved to have all of that for you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's so much fun to get to talk about the books.
Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you so much. And listeners, of course, thank you too for listening to this episode, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the KidLit Love podcast. You'll find links to all of the books, resources, and ideas mentioned in the show notes and at alitlife.com. You'll also find KidLit Love on Substack. That's where you'll find posts for each episode, monthly KidLit roundups, and an invitation to join my summer book club and go deeper into the world of children's literature. And if you loved this podcast and want more, you might like to listen to my other podcast called Get Literate. It's a podcast that explores all things books and reading, notebooks and writing to build a life you love. One more thing. If you loved what you listened to today, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast or take a screenshot of the episode and text it to a friend. This helps the podcast grow and builds our bookish community of Kid Lit Love. Thanks for listening.